So, all right. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Eric and Chris from BrightSign.
Thanks, Rick. This is Eric Brand with BrightSign, along with Chris Dennis. Chris is actually our new regional sales manager in the Midwest. He's replacing me. Chris has been with us for over 2 years in our Los Gatos, California office, and we're moving him into the wintry snowland of Chicago. So he'll be moving sometime in the next couple of weeks. We're excited to have Chris in the Chicago metro area, really to give you guys a lot more exposure to BrightSign. I'm based in Minneapolis and really for the most part handle most of our large retail deployments and projects for BrightSign. So having Chris in the Chicago area is really going to help provide a lot more exposure for you guys, a little more assistance when you need it. And we're really excited to have Chris move out there and really start hitting the ground running. So with that, the plan really today is that my understanding is there's maybe half of the attendees are new to BrightSign, and then the other half have been working with BrightSign to a certain degree. So what I'd like to do is to just kind of step through who BrightSign is, what we do, how we represent the market in digital signage. And I'll be brief on that for those of you who are already familiar with us. But I think it's important that those that are new at least understand who we are. And then I'll hand things over to Chris, and Chris is going to go through some of the new players, the new features that we've introduced, some of our content management software partners, and then we'll open it up for questions. So with that, I'll go to the next slide, Chris, and we'll just talk a little bit about who we are. Chris, can you go to the next slide? Or the next one after that.
Okay. I think it might be lagging behind a little bit.
Okay. Okay, good. This is what we need right here. So for those of you who aren't familiar with BrightSign, the world is full of a lot of digital signage solutions. Most of the industry is made up of software vendors. And what I mean by that is there's a number of companies, literally hundreds and possibly thousands of them around the world that have created some type of software that manages content. And typically in the past, those software companies have used either PCs or Android devices to power their software. And that's become a very, very big pain point in the industry for digital signage because quite frankly, PCs and Android devices are not made for digital signage. So BrightSign came about 10 years ago. We actually had an offshoot of Roku, if you're familiar with Roku video streaming. We branched off about 10 years ago. We are our own company, but why that's important is because if you think of the Roku technology, it's an incredibly powerful video streaming device. And that same technology that Anthony Wood invented really had, Anthony Wood and our CEO, Jeff Hastings, had an idea that this technology has a great commercial use in digital signage. So they went about developing a purposely built digital signage media player, specifically for digital signage. So what we have come across as over the last 8 years, we've quickly become the world's largest manufacturer of media player. And because of that, we've really become known for our reliability. It's extremely affordable. And we've literally taken over the industry in terms of what we're capable of doing. If you look at this eyesore of a chart that Chris has put up, it is an eyesore, but it does designate a few things, which is really interesting. Obviously, it shows the mammoth market share that BrightSign has over everybody else in the industry. If you look at the purple line on the left. But one of the key features is over on the far right in the spreadsheet, where others has over half of the market share. And what I mean by others, those are people that have less than 0.1% of the entire industry market share. So you can see my previous point that this industry is just made up of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of digital signage media players and software vendors. But you'll also notice that out of all the competitors on the left in the market share data, these are all PCs or Android devices, and they're slowly losing market share. I mean, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, the market share was maybe 10% versus 7 or 8% for number two, and it's quickly turning the other way, where the PCs and the Android devices are losing a lot of market share. Next slide. Back one, sorry.
Nope, back one. Nope.
I think this is an interesting slide. If some of you are familiar with Commercial Integrator magazine, they did a big survey last year, and they surveyed a lot of their readers on what companies they recognize, what companies they like. And as you can see, it was really interesting, just specific to digital signage. BrightSign was by far and away the leader and the most recognized and brand out of all digital signage hardware, even beating brands like Samsung and LG, which everyone knows. And I thought the software was a really big eye opener for us, because BrightSign is really a hardware manufacturer. We do have our own software, but typically we're known for the reliability of our hardware. But we also scored very, very high remarks on software as well. So I thought that was an interesting feedback from Commercial Integrator magazine. You can go 2 slides up, Chris. Skip that one. There you go. So really, this is what BrightSign brings to you. We are known for our digital signage players. We offer a free software program. It's an authoring software called BrightAuthor. It allows you to build very simple solutions and even get to the point where you're making very complex solutions. And then we have cloud-based solutions. All of our players are networkable, so you can easily manage your content or your customers' content over our cloud-based solution called BrightSign Network. So we really feel like we have a total solution. We've got outstanding media players that are super reliable. We've got a free software tool that allows you to build the solution. And then we've got a management tool that you can network all of your players and manage the content, view the health of the players from one location, and really hand over your customers a fully purposed digital signage solution. So I'll hand things over to Chris. You can kind of go through a little bit more on this, Chris, and what we stand for and where we, how we've partnered with some of our CMS partners.
Sure, absolutely. And once again, Chris Dennis here, moving into the Midwest. Very excited about that. But I'm just going to talk to, what makes us different as a company, and our hardware approach as opposed to the SaaS software approach that the most of the industry has. And really, we're fundamentally in a different business than most of these other companies. They start with a software as a service. Many times that's going to cost a monthly or yearly a fee per endpoint in order to use that service. And there might be some different features that are baked into it, and the usability might be high, but really at the end of the day, they're not hardware centric, and they don't align themselves with particular hardware companies. At least they used to not do that. And what we've done is done a great job of reaching out to them and forming those relationships and giving them a hardware platform that's reliable, something that is not going to go down. As you can see, the high, very low failure rate here. Oops, excuse me. Is less than 1/4%. And I know an anecdote that Eric likes to use with one of our largest customers here is Bose. They bought 6,000 players, I think it was, last year, and they only had, I believe, 1 of those go down. So when you put that in real life terms, and especially when you're going and talking to your customers and about the reliability of these devices and what they're going to be able to do for them, many times the the money that you made on these projects and the, the profitability of that particular project can really go out the window if you have to start sending out technical reps to go out there and service the devices, or reprovision them, or do all these other different things that you may have to do with a PC or Android device or some of the other cheaper devices that are out there in the industry. And the reason for that that very low failure rate is the fact that these are not PCs. They're solid state devices that are completely built for the purpose of displaying signage, and doing that in a 12 plus or all the way up to 24 hours a day format. It's something that you can really build content for, deploy, and be comfortable in knowing that it's going to continue to run and run according to the schedule that you published it, which we'll get into a little bit later. They're not going to overheat. All of these devices have gone through very strenuous testing. That's something that is a requirement for all of our devices before we actually release them, is that we put them in very hot and even cold environments, and make sure that they can run and perform some very high impact content and other things that would likely cause a PC or some other device to go down in that sort of environment. Form factor is very thin. It's something that you can slot behind any screen. As you can see there, all of them are about the same thickness, although they range in actual size a little bit. And our operating system, which is Bright Author, is completely purpose built for digital signage as well. It's our own proprietary operating system. I suppose it's Linux at its core, but everything built on top of that is completely proprietary to BrightSign, and was built with the idea of building advertisements and signage and messaging, and giving you a lot of different avenues and options on that end. And not only that, but what also separates us from the rest of the industry is not just being a hardware platform, but the fact that we include a software program for absolutely no money. That's something that you can go on our website today and download if you'd like. It's not the beta version. It's not some sort of limited version. It's the actual Bright Author software program that you would then use to build content for your customers. And then our networking solutions, BrightSign Network, we even and Bright Plates as well. We have our own enterprise solution that will allow you to host content in your own environment. We call that on-prem. We have that as available as well, and generally the prices for those are very aggressively priced, and positioned very well when you look at the competition and what some other companies are offering in the market. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into some of the individual player capabilities here in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and exit out here and zoom down to this slide. So what you'll see here in this whole player matrix, once it pops up on your screen, is you'll see 4 families of players, and all of those players sort of have their specific capabilities that you would end up slotting them into a project for. But the reality is that when you go down to this LS entry level player, which retails for $250, that's really going to be able to do a lot of what your customers are asking for. And it's good to remember that you're never going to lose functionality when you go up in device. You're only going to gain it. So for example, if you want to do live feeds or zoning with an HD player, you're obviously going to be able to do that. You're just going to be able to add some of these other features as well. But some of the basic things that an LS player is going to be able to do for you, and not only LS but all of our players, is zoning. And this is something that you're going to essentially be able to want to do with every presentation that you create. And what it is just the ability to segment your screens into multiple different windows and then drop different assets, be it images, video, maybe it's some sort of HTML site or a software dashboard that you want to display. or maybe an audio zone. Maybe it's not something that you actually want to display at all, or text on screen or some sort of news feed. You're going to be able to do that with every single device that we sell, and you'll be able to create multiple windows. But we even take it a step further here, where you can even layer your zones as well. So if you want to have one zone appear as a background image, or maybe if you want to have a video playing in the background with live text over it, or some sort of presentation running in the foreground, that's all some stuff that you can do, and really you can do natively within BrightAuthor. It doesn't require some sort of a really sophisticated third-party software, like InDesign or After Effects. Obviously, those things are going to come into play to make this content dynamic and professional, but that sort of zone layering functionality is built right into BrightAuthor. Not only that, but each zone is controlled according to its own playlist, which means that each zone can really get its own set schedule of content running independently of each other. So if you want your main zone to display, in the example here, what is your destination, a video of about some vacation that somebody can buy, and then these two other zones are just displaying completely other information, you can do that and then actually have them run according to their own schedule. Meaning that your main zone could essentially change content at noon and then at dinner time, and then maybe reset itself in the morning, while these other two zones stay fixed or run something entirely different. You can also synchronize zones together. So essentially the playback of one zone could then trigger playback in another zone. Let's say you wanted to have what is your destination video, the ending of that trigger playback of some sort of message down here at the bottom in your ticker zone, or some sort of deal that you can scan using a QR code or something like that, that was based on the information in that video. That's all something that you can do, and it's all using this zoning function. Live feeds are something that you're going to hear a lot about with digital signage, and these are assets that are really important to use, because it's information that you don't have to update yourself. It's going to stay updated just by whatever live data you input into BrightAuthor. So if you want to use assets from CNN or MarketWatch or weather.com or things like that, those are all that's all live information that you can leverage, bring into your presentation, and display natively. Basically, every news outlet that anybody on the call here would prescribe to all have RSS feeds that are free, that you can very easily grab and bring within a live feed zone within your presentation. Some of the paid options, many of them have paid options too, where you can display video updates and live news updates and things like that. Taking a step further, you can even display third-party scheduling apps and some of the software tools that maybe your customers are using. Sometimes it might require a little bit of development, but many times you can just display it natively. So if your customers are using some sort of job tracking software on a manufacturing floor, or maybe they're using their Salesforce dashboard to display live sales stats, or one that we've heard a lot about is call centers that want to display live call statistics so people know where they are throughout the day and know how many calls that they need to make. This live feed zone will allow them to grab the tool that particular software company has made available to display that, drop it within a live feed or an HTML zone, and there you go. And now you're leveraging data that is something that you don't have to continuously update, and adds a lot of value to your presentation. Video is really something that was developed with top of mind here at BrightSign, and not only video, but just total resolution of content. This particular device, the LS player, has the ability to display HD 1920 by 1080 video at 60 frames per second, which is the majority of the content that you're going to run into today. But very soon, a lot of even our phones and a lot of the cameras that a lot of us are using on the call today are going to be able to shoot in 4K, and soon even 8K is something that we're going to start hearing about. But this particular player does have the ability to display a single video zone, along with some other locally hosted content like images, or maybe a single bar at the bottom displaying a live text or news or something like that. So this particular player, you can do HD video along with some other limited assets. But all of our devices have the ability to not only display HD, but once you get into the HD, XD, and XT family, then you can start displaying some of that high resolution content, and even doing some more dynamic things. So previously, the HD player was what its name would suggest, just an HD device. It could display 1920 by 1080 content, and utilize just HD video. Now this particular device has the ability to display H.264 and even H.265 content, which is a vehicle jacket for or content jacket essentially for 4K codecs. So now you can build true 4K content on a $350 device. Not only that, but in our XT and our XD family, you'll actually have the ability to display 2 full videos on the screen at once. So if you're doing some sort of product comparison video, or if you just want to have 2 videos on your screen for any purpose at all, that's something you'll be able to do. And backing up, when you're thinking about what player to go ahead and position or spec for your project, video and resolution of not only that video, but of all of the content that's in your presentation, be it an image, be it in some sort of HTML asset. This is one thing that you're really going to want to keep an eye on, and make sure that you're slotting the right device. And many times I'll tell my customers to future-proof their device, because while the restaurant that you're working with, or whoever it may be, may not be shooting 4K content today, or their marketing company that they work with may not be shooting 4K content today, it might be something that they may look to do in the future. So giving yourself that ability to grow into that for a very nominal fee is something that could be very effective for them. Interactivity is also something that our devices were built with that top of mind. And interactivity can mean a bunch of different things, touchscreen just being one of them. Going back to the previous screen, we essentially have 3 touchscreen interactive devices that are part of the HD, the XD, and the XT family. But really, any of our devices can do interactive content and interact with the world in multiple different ways. In fact, many of the devices that you need for it to interact with the world around it is something that we sell here under our umbrella at BrightSign. And if we don't, then we certainly do have the relationships to point you in the right direction for something like a barcode scanner or an IR remote control. And then what's different about our platform is that the tools to go ahead and build those interactive triggers are handled within BrightAuthor, which we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. You just essentially click on over to the interactive tab, and those presentations are built much in the same way. You're going to drop in your home screen, and then you'll just choose the touch emblem there, and essentially just drag that from your home screen to the next screen that you'd like it to land on. And then you can even tell it to time out after a certain amount of time, or to head back to that home screen if they were to touch the screen again. And many of these other interactive controls are built much in the same way. All of them are just triggers for a certain content. So whatever the trigger may be, either motion or touch interactivity, or a barcode scanner, it's all going to be built in BrightAuthor, and the tools are all within there. And not only that, but through UDP and through GPIO and USB connectivity, we can also interact with different AMX and Crestron devices, and other different show controllers, or audio systems and things like that. We can also display on projectors. We can also integrate with video wall processors and video matrix devices and things like that, because of all the I/O ports that are included on these devices. One thing that your customers, I'm sure, will probably be asking you about, and is something that we've been involved a lot on, because of the capabilities that are built into BrightAuthor, are building video walls. And previously, probably 5 years ago, these building these were very expensive, and they involved a lot of different devices and some very expensive software, and depending on what you want to do, using some of those video wall processors or video matrix devices may be necessary, but there are tools within BrightSign's devices and within BrightAuthor that allow you to build video walls just using a device of ours at each endpoint. So essentially, the synchronization tools are built into the back end, and all you have to do is either network your BrightSign devices together if there's not a network available in the building, or you just connect them to the network that is available at that building, and now these BrightSign players can talk to each other. And essentially, you can, if you have a talented video person who's proficient in After Effects or one of the other video editing programs, you can chop that video up yourself, and then publish it to each BrightSign device, and then BrightSign will do it. The BrightSign device will do it its best to synchronize those together to make one large video or one large image. Or BrightSign can do it for you, and you'll enter in some pertinent information about your wall, the size of screens you're using, the thickness of the bezel on those screens, and then it'll do its best with the information that you've given it to break up that video and then synchronize it once you publish it to your wall. So through BrightWall, through AutoWall, which is sort of an HTML asset way of publishing a video wall content, and will actually give you a lot more flexibility, is BrightWall. BrightWall is essentially a video only application, and through interactive sync, you can really create these these really high impact video wall applications, and you can do it for fairly low cost, especially compared to what it used to cost, and what many of your competitors may still be speccing. Because those tools are built into there, and essentially all you need to do is have the assets available to bring into BrightAuthor and display. Now, some of those are probably the icons that I've clicked on are the things that you're going to run into most often. We're essentially going to have the ability to display just about any type of content you'd like. I'll probably touch on a few more things here, but the reality is that we teach a 3-day course on everything that these devices have the ability to do. So if you do have a question about some sort of ancillary technology that you'd like to integrate with, or something that you'd like to display and you're not too sure, obviously you can give myself or Eric a call, and we can explain how that will work for you. But the last thing I wanted to touch on here is our ability, some of the abilities of our enterprise player, which is our XT1144 and our XT244, because those really are the devices that we feel are probably best for those enterprise projects, where your customer is really trying to have the ability to do a lot of different dynamic things, and they're really trying to keep up with the Joneses, I guess you could say. One thing it's going to have the ability to do is, and the XD in many ways is much in the same. They really do have essentially the same HTML engine behind them, but if you're trying to do presentations with multiple HTML assets, or maybe you're doing an interactive presentation that is going to require some, very sophisticated pinch, swipe, or zoom interactivity on the screen, where you want to scroll through your menu items, or maybe you have a map on there and you want to zoom in or out. In order to do that, you're going to need to have a very strong and fast and powerful rendering engine behind that, and the XD and the XT are going to provide that engine for those types of projects. But what they're also going to be able to do, allow you to do, is display full 4K resolution graphics, not only in one zone, but in multiple zones on your within your project. And the XT will also allow you to not only display those 4K graphics and multiple videos, but it'll also allow you to display live TV fairly easily. And this isn't something that you have to do over IP. Of course, you could do that with essentially every device we sell, but some of your customers, I'm sure, will probably already have TVs in place. Maybe it's a bar or restaurant, and they want to leverage those TVs and turn those into something that they can use for advertising purposes. This device comes with an HDMI in port on it. So essentially, you just pass in your cable feed, and I suppose it wouldn't even really need to be a cable device. You could pass through a PC feed or a Blu-ray player, whatever it may be. And then within BrightAuthor, you just create a zone that tells the BrightSign device, I would like this TV feed to appear in this location on screen and to be this large. And then you can add in other assets around it, an HTML animated logo, or live text feed, or some sort of other video or image content that you'd like to display. So this is a great device to bring to some of your customers that maybe they have a low budget, but they already have TVs and they know they want to get into doing signage. Essentially, all they have to do is buy this XT1144, and they don't have to turn the game or whatever other entertainment they have going on the screen off. They can display both. Not only that, but we classified this particular device as enterprise because it also has the ability to do PoE, which is just short for power over Ethernet, which may not sound like a lot of wattage, but if you were to install 20, 25, 30 of these into a building, that really can require a lot of power consumption at each of those endpoints. And not only that, it's going to take a lot more wiring and time for whoever does the installation for that particular device. So installing an XT1144 or an XT244 will allow you to power that device through the Ethernet port, which in most instances you're probably going to have a requirement for anyway. So, at a high level, that is really everything that the devices have the ability to display. Really any sort of asset you can think of, we can display in some form or fashion. It's really just a matter of what those assets are, and how many of those assets there are. And once you gather all that information, then we can make a really good or have a really good idea of what device that they should go ahead and spec. So to summarize, again, what is the resolution of their video content, or the other content that may reside in their presentation, such as images or HTML. And not only that, what are the HTML assets or live assets that they have displaying in their presentation? And the number of those assets and the resolution of those assets will again help us pick the right device. Now, once you've decided what you actually want to display on your screen and the extent of that content, excuse me. The next thing to decide is exactly how you're going to get that content to your device. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit escape here and scroll down. And there are multiple different ways to get that presentation to your device, and actually 3 of them are free right out of BrightAuthor. There's the old sneaker net way of doing it, essentially publishing content to the micro SD card on your player and walking that over to the player that you have. If you have a customer that doesn't want to have this displaying or hosted on their network, or maybe they just don't have a network available, that's something that they can do for free out of BrightAuthor. Something that most of our customers probably utilize is the local network publishing. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as local file network publishing on our website. But essentially, that's just using the local area network that your customers already have at their location to go ahead and to publish directly to any number of devices that are also hosted on that same network. So that's something that you can do for free out of BrightAuthor. If they're using a VPN or some sort of virtual network and across multiple locations, then you actually have the ability to utilize local file networking to publish to all of those devices at that that are within that same virtual network. And then there's simple file networking, which is utilized a lot less than local file, but it can be an effective publishing tool, especially for customers that want to do remote updates, but may have a low budget or something like that. So essentially, you use a web space like a Dropbox folder. I guess you'd have to pay for a Dropbox Enterprise account now, so they give you the public URL, or just any sort of file sharing website or an FTP site, and you host your content there. You drop your content into that web space or that web folder, and then you're going to tell your BrightSign devices to check back in with that folder, every 5 minutes, every hour, however timely your content needs to be, and it'll grab that information, based on that time interval that you set, drop it onto the SD card on the player, and then continue to play that. So those are 3 that you can do for absolutely free out of BrightAuthor. Now, BrightSign Network is our cloud-based tool. It's $99 a year per endpoint. But what it's going to do is it's going to give you the ability to publish to those devices that may not be within that same network. And maybe your devices are spread all across the country, or maybe just all around your regional area, or even if they have 2 locations. This tool is really going to make publishing content and keeping it up to date, and making sure that whoever is responsible for updating that content doesn't have to drive all over town to make sure it's updated. So BrightSign Network is going to give you that ability. And I'm just going to jump forward here. Yep. Sorry about that. What BrightSign Network is also going to do, it's going to give you additional publishing tools that, in my opinion, are going to make it a whole lot simpler to update your content. With the addition of giving you the ability to publish to any device regardless of network, it's going to give you the ability to do what we call dynamic playlists and tagged playlists. Essentially, those 2 functionalities are going to make updating content within your presentation a whole lot simpler, because you're not going to have to bounce back to BrightAuthor or BrightAuthor to update the playlist with new images or videos or whatever the assets may be. Essentially, you can render a particular zone in your presentation for a dynamic playlist, and within BrightSign Network, that particular playlist folder will be hosted. So if you drop all your images or videos in there that you'd like to display, you just need to log back into your BrightSign Network account, pull out the videos or images that you don't want to use, drop in the new ones, and then hit refresh. And then that particular zone in your presentation will update with the new content that you dropped in. Not only that, but you can drop in new content such as images or videos, but maybe one of those videos isn't supposed to play until noon, or is supposed to expire at the end of the day. Those are things that you can actually either pause or delay the playback of within that dynamic playlist. So utilizing that function is going to be really helpful, and really make it a scalable product for you to use, and really make it a whole lot more simplistic for your customers that want to manage their own content as well. And tagged playlists is actually a function that is for anybody that has a bunch of different assets. Let's say that they've uploaded 10, 15, 20 different presentations to their network. Well, those 20 different presentations are going to have a lot of different images and videos that they've now uploaded into their cloud network. So in order to manage all of those and make sure that they can find all of them, tagged playlists will allow you to add tags to those particular assets, so that you can very easily find them and then grab them and then bring them into certain presentations. So you can create rules within that tag playlist that says, I'd like to display within this particular zone every image that begins with Saturday's menu. So then you just have to get a little bit creative with the way that you're saving your content, and you just name all of the images that you'd like to display on Saturday for happy hour or whatever it may be, Saturday's menu, and then it'll grab all of those, and then that particular zone is just going to play that particular content. And there's a bunch of different rules and triggers for that as well. So those two functions are going to make it a whole lot easier, but it's also going to allow you to divide your players into groups, which is going to make it a whole lot easier for you to manage, because you can name those groups by whatever floor they're on, or whatever department they belong to, or whoever's responsible for keeping those particular players up to date. So now you can drop multiple players in that group, and when you need to publish to the players in the lobby or in the lunchroom, then you can just go ahead and publish to that group, and in one fell swoop, they'll go ahead and update. Not only that, but you can do different administrative functions and assign specific user roles and permissions. Maybe there's somebody in your organization that is just going to be responsible for keeping the displays in the lunchroom up to date, but you don't want them touching the displays that are in the hallway or in some other area of the building. Well, that's a rule that you can assign to that person's particular role. And we have 6 baked in roles, starting with network administrator and going all the way down to a viewer who literally can just go in and make sure that that content is displaying, but not actually edit everything. But all of those roles are editable. So if there's a specific functionality of a general manager or of a network admin or of a viewer that you'd like to either add or remove, that's something that you can do, and give them that conditional access. And then in addition to that, doing some of the diagnostic testing and being able to view presentation playback and, generate reports about, who is interacting with your presentation, or how often they interacted with a particular zone, or, check on the network health of the devices that your players are living on. Those diagnostic and network management tools are also going to be built into BrightSign Network, and sort of give you that auditing dashboard to make sure that the presentations that you publish are now running at the correct times, and that people are utilizing your presentation in the way that you thought they might. And then lastly is BrightSign Network Enterprise Edition, and this is something that cloud is becoming more popular, but there's still certain verticals and industries that are just not willing to have their content disseminated over a cloud network, or to have hosted in somebody else's servers. banks, sometimes universities, hospitals is another one, and certainly government institutions are many times are going to balk at that idea. So this is why we created BrightSign Network Enterprise Edition. Essentially, this is a self-hosted version of BrightSign Network. They're going to buy their own BSN application, and then that's going to then be installed onto their server, so that they can now have all of the features that we just talked about, but now hosted in their own environment and according to their own network security standards. And if your customer does communicate that to you, we do have BSN EE available, and that's something that we actually assist you in the installation of as well. So if that's something that their network administrator doesn't have the ability to do, or somebody where you're sitting doesn't have the ability to do, our engineers can sit alongside and make sure that it's installed in an effective manner, and that your groups and your whole environment and all that is set up in the correct way. Now, I'm just going to exit out here for a second. Now, part of the value of working with BrightSign, at least in my estimation, is not only the the value that we're providing on the hardware side and in the way of reliability, and really the pedigree that we bring to this industry of really 10 years strong behind us, and our networking tools that are either essentially free or very inexpensive when you compare that to the to the rest of the market. But it's also the partners that we've onboarded and that we work with, because many times what your customers may find, and really that I'm finding on a daily basis, is that while BrightAuthor is a very powerful tool, and for some of your basic presentations it can be the perfect tool for you. And really, if you compare it to most of the industry, it's actually more powerful than most of these other CMS programs in its robustness and in its total number of capabilities. But really, the value of working with us is not only can you utilize all those tools, but you can utilize the tools of all of our partners as well. And a lot of these partners have really made a name for themselves in the industry by making an intuitive and easy to use platform for end users, for somebody that's never used a CMS program before. So if they're passing this off to somebody in marketing or an office administrator or just anybody in the building that's never used a CMS platform before, it's going to be a little bit hard, and it may not be as intuitive enough for them to use a program like BrightAuthor, which was really developed for an engineering-minded person, or a Crestron programmer or something like that. So they could utilize the services of AppSpace or of Signage Live, or Carousel Industries, or excuse me, Carousel Signage, which would be Tightrope. So all of these are available, and we've worked really hard to get them integrated on our platform, and many of them have come to us because they just haven't had that robust hardware platform that they can rely on. So it's really been a cohesive relationship and has worked out for both of us. So many times it may make sense to bring in a software partner, and once you've gathered all the details of the project, you can come and talk to myself or Eric about that. But it is good to know that all of these are available, and actually many of these have gone through a process called B-Deploy, where they can actually remotely provision their devices. So if your customer buys a BrightSign system and they're not happy with using BrightAuthor or BrightSign Network, after 6 months or a year of time, they could go ahead and onboard one of these solutions, and we don't have to send out any a tech, or you don't actually have to go to the locations. As long as they're connected to a network, we could actually onboard that CMS remotely without actually having been there. And What I'll often do for customers that do want to use BrightSign services such as BrightAuthor and BrightSign Network is many time I'll introduce them to a lot of the content partners that we have available, because many of these people um, can make the process of creating content, not only in its beginning stages, but in an ongoing fashion, a whole lot easier and simplistic for your average end user. Or they can essentially take over the whole boat and put together sort of a managed services package for you. Well, they were just entirely manage your content. And many of these partners will fill their own space within the industry, such as Tint. They provide a lot of different social media and news live updating assets that you can very easily bring into your presentation. A screen feed again provides a lot of those live updates, both video and text, and you can even actually customize it. So if you'd like to have your logo on your weather feed, or your logo on your on some sort of Facebook social media aggregator where it's bringing in different hashtags that is of interest to your customer, they can provide that sort of service to you. Now, one that Eric and I generally focus on, and not just us, but really everybody at BrightSign, because of their extensive history with working with our hardware, and not just working with our hardware, but developing very professionally looking content. Be it in HTML or producing images or and videos and things like that. But Red Dot Digital Media is a great partner of ours, and can really be a great partner for everybody on the call, and really can just be used as sort of a background piece to the whole package that you're going to be presenting to your customer. They have no problem operating much in the same way that we do. We're a hardware provider. We bring a lot of value with our hardware, but it's your customer, and you're going to go in there and tell the story of how you can service them, and all the different things that you can do for them, as opposed to the competition. And Red Dot will do that much in the same way, but on the content side. So if you don't have the content development people inside in order to create the presentations that your customer is talking about creating, Red Dot Digital Media can sit on a call with you, talk even with your end user, or just in a huddle with just the people here on the call, and they can gather all that information and give you an idea of what it's going to cost to create the exact experience that your customer would like to create. And it's something that they're doing literally on a daily basis, and they do a very good job of doing. Really no job is too small or too large for them, which is great. They really do a great job, and I know that that we may be working with AllNet to provide some sort of specific service, and to make it so it's something that you could very easily package with a BrightSign player, and sell, and make sure that the content side, which really at the end of the day is in many cases the most important part, right? Because what's displaying on the screen, the advertising on the screen, what's actually grabbing the customer's eye is really what you're after. And Red Dot, and even zooming out, a lot of these other partners on here can really help you create those experiences, and fill in a lot of the gaps that may be present. So with that, that pretty much wraps it up. I see that there are questions down here at the bottom, but thank you for the time.
Yeah, we've got some questions definitely for you, Chris. So one of the questions that came in was about information that shows up that the end users, or the designers, might have in a PDF or an Excel, how to snapshot it and manipulate it to make it available in one of the windows on the player. Do you have any insight or tips or tricks that you can offer for the content that's not natively supported?
Certainly, yeah. So to do Excel or to display any sort of MS Office program is a bit of a task. Now we do have a specific workflow where you can display that, but essentially what you'd be doing is sort of taking a snapshot of that Excel document or that Word document or whatever it may be, and then dropping it into your presentation. What I think what the question was probably after is, how do we drop that into the presentation, but also have it automatically updating, so when I update my Excel doc, that information pops up on screen. And backing up to the software partners page, Bright Author, again, because it's being used in so many different avenues and by so many different people, we don't bake in a lot of those integrated tools because many times our customers may not use them. But for example, I know AppSpace and Imvix specifically has developed that integration with all of the Microsoft Office's products. So if you want to display a PowerPoint presentation within your project, or Excel or Word or any of those programs, they actually just completed integrations with about 140 other software tools. So that would probably be the easiest way of going about it. But if you'd like to stay within the BrightSign umbrella, we could take that offline and just shoot me an email, and I could actually send you exactly how that's done.
Sure. Okay. Well, it sounds like using the snip tool on Windows is pretty popular for a lot of that stuff, but you're saying if they want it to be automated in any way, or if they want to, the next question comes up to rules and roles, and I think that might be part of it. So if they're importing data from an Excel and they want someone to have a role to be able to modify that data, it would have to be individual lines and not just a snip, correct? They would have to basically export it to something where it would be text as opposed to a native Excel file.
So they could do it both ways. So you could definitely use a snippet tool and then just bring that into your presentation, because once you use a snippet tool, essentially it's just a JPEG or PNG, however you save it. So then you could just bring that into a zone within your presentation and display it that way. But yes, but you could also, there's ways of saving an Excel document as text, or essentially just saving it as an image file and displaying it within your presentation. Or as I said before, if you actually like it to be something that's is something that you can update, and then those updates are reflected on screen, then using a partner that's done that integration, like an Imvix or an AppSpace, would probably be the best way to go.
Okay, thanks. All right, so like I said, the next question goes on to rules and roles that you were just talking about a few minutes ago. So the specific question comes up, and this is a very popular application for us through AllNet, the microbrews, the microbreweries, these smaller restaurants that have a menu that changes every single day, or a beer list that changes every single day.
Sure.
If they wanted to have a graphic artist create all the templates and then only assign a role to like the local on-site manager to change like what beers are available today, but not give them any possibility to mess up that graphic background. I mean, I'm sure you know what we're talking about. Every time you go into a restaurant, someone has moved something and the aspect ratio is all wrong, or the logo on one screen, the logo's on one side, and on the other screen, the logo's has been moved or has been modified in some way. It doesn't look very professional.
Sure, of course.
So that can be addressed in rules and roles.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you want to give that particular person just a role where they can edit a specific zone within your presentation, or a specific type of content, that's actually something that you can do as well. So if I'm sure that guy is probably excellent at brewing beer, but if you don't want him to actually be able to mess with the logo at the top, or maybe you have a ticker at the bottom, or some sort of other fixed part of your presentation, and you just want them to edit the menu items, you can either give him the ability to just change the content within that particular zone, or what you could also do is create text fields within your presentation through the live text function, and then you can give them the ability to just go in and change the text in those particular fields. We're doing a tap takeover today, and we're going to have these 3 IPAs, and they cost this much, and then he hits enter, and then the menu is going to update with that new information about those new IPAs. So that's definitely something that you can do, and there's probably multiple ways of doing it.
Okay, thanks. All right, we've got some questions here that are probably a little over my head. Hopefully they make sense to you.
We'll give it a shot.
Yeah. We currently use MVIX.
Sure.
Can we use the BrightSign LS player as the hardware?
As far as I know, you can use every single model with MVIX currently. Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. Another question comes through. We have a signage CMS that we developed for use with PC-based systems. Do you have APIs available that we could use to integrate our current content with your hardware?
Absolutely. Yeah, we have an open API, and if you're interested in getting integrated with BrightSign players, that's actually a process we could get started today. Just need to email our product integration team, and they'll respond probably back within 24 or 48 hours with just some questions for you and to get a date on the calendar to talk about it in further detail. So absolutely, that's something we're always interested in talking about.
Okay, nice. All right, so Mike, follow up with me if you need contact information for Eric and Chris. Okay. Okay, for regard to the XT 1144 for a sports bar with 50 TVs, they want to have 8 outputs. Do they need a player for each TV, or can we run them through a matrix switching?
So in that situation, okay, yeah, absolutely, they could do it both ways. Now, giving yourself the ability to have a device at each endpoint would give yourself the ability to have multiple different presentations at each screen that you have. But yes, if you have a video matrix device, you could then split out that content to 8, or I guess depending on the number of outputs, that many screens.
Okay, thanks. All right, and then follow-up question on this. I don't know if this was addressed in the slide deck. I had to step away for just a moment. Sure. Do these devices have HDCP content protection, or are they allowed to be distributed through professional and residential grade distribution gear?
So these devices natively, I do not believe have HDCP content protection. So that you can do it in.
Hey, Chris, I'll pop in. The
Okay.
1144 can pass through HDCP 2.2 or 1.4 content. So that if you're trying, if the question refers to passing through a Comcast or DirecTV or any type of live TV, it will pass through HDCP compliant content.
Okay, so Eric, if you're saying if there's a live video feed is any portion of the feed, then the HDMI output from the BrightSign player out to the displays also needs to be an HDCP compliant path?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. The next question that comes up here, when using the XT and live video, can you push the advertisement at certain times, maybe at the push of a button on a touchscreen, or is it on all the time or on a schedule? And then, hold on, he gives a for instance, but the text window ran out of space.
I just ran out of space.
For instance, okay, so he says, for instance, when commercials are on a live sporting event, so he doesn't want to have the advertisement come on, the advertisement, like say an internal advertisement for a bar or a sports club, whatever. He doesn't want to have it come on at all during the live play, but only during commercial breaks or replays, things like that.
Now, and this is another question of licensing. Now, actually, you're not really supposed to do that, so we can't recommend that you do that. Now, does it have the ability to both schedule that and also trigger with some sort of interactivity different ads at specific times throughout the day? Absolutely, you can, but that's not something that we can recommend you do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like that addresses his follow-up comment. He said if the bar or restaurant would want to push an advertisement on drink specials or appetizers, but not during the game, but during the rest of the day. So if for that you could do it based on what the game when it appears on your either satellite broadcast schedule or cable broadcast schedule. Okay, perfect. And Randy just asked the exact question about about the HDMI output. So Randy, note Eric's answer on that one earlier about HDCP. All right. It looks like. Okay, we have another question about internal storage. Do the players come with different levels of internal storage, or are they all the same? And when do you need to purchase and install SD cards?
So that's actually something that I should have touched on. So every single device does require a micro SD card, and we don't do onboard storage because the devices are being used for so many different things that we wouldn't know how much you would need. So we sell a 4, 8, 16, and a 32, but you can even onboard even larger micro SD cards or even SATA drives if you needed a very high space for some very large content that you're onboarding. But the reason that we also did that is because if there's a network outage, your device is never going to be without content. It's just going to continue to run that content, according to the last schedule that was published to it. So no, we don't include onboard storage, but we do have micro SD cards available. And if you aren't going to buy them from us, just make sure that you are buying class 10 micro SDs with a high writing speed. And really the SD cards that we sell are sort of something that we're subsidizing, and they were made specifically for us by SanDisk for our usage. So it does make quite a bit of sense to buy them from us. And really the reliability of our devices was made with those particular SD cards in mind.
And I can vouch for the content playing even when the network is in outage, because we have all of ours. Oh, by the way, we're not as big as Bose, but we do have a BrightSign player in every single branch displaying digital signage for the promotions that AllNet runs each month. So for those of you who are within driving distance of an AllNet branch, if you come into the will call, you'll see we've got Samsung commercial panels scattered throughout the will call branches. And usually you'll see, the mount promos or the cable promos or whatever are all detailed on these screens. Well, anyway, that content is shared by Brian here at the Elk Grove Village office out to each location, and it's apparently stored right on the players, because we routinely shut off network to those devices because they're hooked up through our Arachnus switches. And when we demo how Oversee works, we're constantly cycling all of these ports on our switches. And well, it's it's not a critical function of the branch. It's not like we're killing the credit card processing machine or the will call terminal. It's we just leave the BrightSign plugged in through it. Well, anyway, we leave it off probably half the day sometimes, just because we forgot to cycle it back in. But anyway, it's so. Brian, when Brian pushes the content, like the next time it's live, it just syncs up to the content the last content that he's pushed, and we're off and running.
That's very cool.
So yeah.
Yeah, and Rick, I don't want to minimize or skip over the importance of that SD card topic. For all of you out there, we as consumers know that you can go to, you could go to Walgreens or Walmart or a discount any retail store and find a $4 or $5 SD card. The SD card that we provision is a very, very important part of our solution. And the reason that Chris touched on it, meaning we have a contract with SanDisk that they produce the SD card specific to our bill of materials. So there are a lot of very poor quality SD cards out on the market. And you're on your own if you go out and say, you know what, I'm going to buy a $5 or a $10 SD card and just use it in the BrightSign player. It'll work, but the fail rate that we mentioned at the beginning of our presentation is real. Our fail rate, the players themselves fail at less than 0.25% of the time. So if you put in a poor quality SD card, that's 99.9999% of the reason why the player will fail is because of a poor SD card or the network fails. It's almost never the media player failing. So I don't want to brush over the importance of why you need to use a good quality SD card, and just don't even bother buying an SD card from off the shelf. Buy it from BrightSign. You'll never have to worry about it because we guarantee that SD card. So just make sure that we emphasize that part of it.
All right, thanks, Eric. And the follow-up question is, does AllNet sell the SD cards? So the ones that BrightSign assorts, we can source for you. And like Eric said, if you want to source it locally, maybe go to your camera shop or somewhere like that where they are going to have the highest quality versions.
But even then, Rick, though,
yeah,
those are still, they're much higher quality, but they're not an industrial grade. They're usually commercial grade, where there's a big difference. And even there's a big difference between an industrial grade SD card and the BrightSign SD card, because again, we mandate to SanDisk that they use the exact same bill of materials for every SD card, and it's specified for BrightSign. So it's a big deal, and a lot of people brush over it. But when you're talking digital signage, these media players are reading and writing over and over and over millions of times, and it's not a big deal if you're just if it's a camera where it's just going to read and write a few dozen times in its life cycle. These things are reading and writing every day over and over, and potentially millions of times a year, and you need a very, very high quality SD card. So I know it's a small part of the overall solution, but it's such an important part of it. I would highly recommend that every single project be using a BrightSign SD card, and it'll minimize all of the pain that you have to roll out a truck to the endpoint to try to figure out what the problem is, because 99% of the time it's going to be the SD card or the network.
Okay, yeah, that's a great point about the read and write cycles.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you need information on that, we have it on our website. There's a document that actually goes into a lot of detail about what we put into our SD cards. So you can find that, or if you need it, we can get it to the AllNet guys, and they can post it on their intranet as well.
All right, thank you. All right, and then we had one last question. Nope, we got a couple more. Okay. If you could spec one player consistently cost-effective and powerful enough for 90% of what we would want to do, which one would it be? The LS series or the HD series?
Chris, you can go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, why don't we both answer that? Honestly, I would probably, for what I typically spec honestly, is the XD 234, because that family is going to need or is going to be able to do all of the very basic things, but some 90% of that is probably going to want to do some more sophisticated things down the line. And especially as we get on in years here, and digital signage is something that people are going to be even more inundated with on a daily basis. You're going to need to produce more content that grabs eyes, and the XD player is going to allow you to do that. But again, it's also priced fairly aggressively as well. So that would be.
I would have agreed with Chris last year during our Series 3, because the XD is the first model that does 4K, but the new Series 4 models, I know Chris mentioned the new HD players actually handle 4K video. So I would actually step down to the HD, either the 224 or the 1024 as your go-to, because it'll handle future. I mean, most people aren't doing 4K right now, but every TV will be 4K moving forward. And as people use these players, 4K is going to be something that they're going to need. So I would say the HD models could be a good go-to for you, because it'll handle pretty much every project you're going to need. It'll handle 4K for future proofing. And then the only thing that I would move up to the XD or the XT for is if your customer is using a lot of HTML, then the XD and specifically the XT models have very, very powerful HTML engines in them. And then obviously the XT, if you need live video, is the only product you can go to. But I think you're going to get a lot of benefit out of the HD players, more so than you would have last year in last year's models.
That's definitely true. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for Thanks for sharing that. So Brian messaged me and told me that our players are all XD series, 233s and 234s.
Yep, they're
So
great models.
Smart guy.
we do a lot of HTML. So I don't know if you guys get Wally's emails, but they're very attractive.
Well, I mean, and that was to my point is
Yeah.
if you're doing HTML, the HD can handle HTML, but not a high volume of it.
Yeah.
The XD and specifically the XT is an incredibly powerful HTML engine in it. So yeah, definitely that's the reason why I'd step up to the XD and certainly to the XT if it's a lot of HTML.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we've got a couple more questions here. First of all, Andrew says, thank you for going over the details and features. You've cleared up a lot of questions we had. So Andrew, thanks for joining us today. That's really why we do these things. And then Mike has the question. This is our last question, it looks like. How straightforward is it to send IR control to the television to turn it on and off? Can we enter hex codes like Pronto hex, similar to the way that we would program RTI, URC, etc.?
I'm not familiar with Pronto. The way I would answer it is, yes, you can set up IR codes easily through BrightAuthor. I would also suggest that you also look into using serial, turning it on and off, and even more so, as long as you can get the CEC commands,
Right.
doing a lot of the TV controls over CEC through HDMI is a great resource, and it's very capable of doing it through the BrightAuthor software as well. So those three solutions are easily capable. Pronto, I'm not familiar with. I don't know if you've heard of that, Chris, but certainly IR,
it's a generic.
And
so,
oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, so Pronto hex is the generic file format for IR. They used to, when you used to get the protocol documents from the 7 or 8 different video manufacturers, they would all come in a different format. So Pronto standardized it. It's like a multi-octet. Anyway, so if you program RTI, URC, Crestron, AMX, and then the old Pronto was, the first one that really kind of pushed it out there and made it popular. But anyway, that's when you're copying and pasting out of a spreadsheet or off of these databases, it's Pronto hex is the format.
Got it. I guess bottom line is IR, serial, CEC are all capable of controlling certainly on off, but you can also send a ping to the TV every 30 seconds or 15 minutes or whatever the interval to make sure that it's always on HDMI 1. Or there's times where in my world, the retail world, you go to a Best Buy and the guy is on the floor, they change it from HDMI 1 to HDMI 2 and then it doesn't go back. You can send a signal to the TV to always stay on HDMI input 1, for instance, or at 8 a.m. turn the TVs on and at 10 p.m. turn them off. Those are all capable within our software.
Perfect. Okay, so the next question is, can the device output IP control if the TV is on the same network as the BrightSign?
It can, but I'm wondering like what type of control are they looking to accomplish?
It's serial control essentially, except over IP.
Yeah,
and I think the number one hiccup there, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here, would be if you've got a bar and they're all on the same network, you don't want 10 different players controlling. I think serial from point to point, from endpoint to display is probably the best. Would you agree with that?
The serial's the most common. CEC is extremely difficult because there's no protocol, if you will, for CEC. Every TV manufacturer has their own CEC commands. So I would say Samsung's the best at it. LG's the worst at it. But serial is typically the most common way to handle that because it's a much easier command, if you will. Okay,
and Eric, I just want to share that our experiences mimic yours.
Yeah.
we sell a lot of powered soundbar.
Yeah, if you've worked with any of the TV manufacturers specific to CEC, your head will spin.
We sell a lot of powered soundbars and we sell a lot of AV receivers that have CEC integration as a feature on that they discuss, and it's spotty, and it's usually spotty. It's not the audio equipment's fault, or in your case, the video player's fault. It's usually the fault of the display. The displays are there, like you said, it's the Wild West. There are no rules to implementation.
Yeah.
And the Sony and Samsung are pretty solid with our sound bars, and I would expect they would be solid with your players as well. But like, yeah, the other brand that you mentioned that we don't distribute, they're
I'm glad I picked the right brand.
yeah, so are we. All right, I think we're all done with the questions. So if anyone has any last minute questions, please feel free to type it in the question box really quickly.
And I'll add one last comment, and I know Chris mentioned it on our call or earlier. Red Dot Media will get you connected with Daryl. Daryl Cooter owns Red Dot Media. They are just a great resource for if you've got a project, hand it over to them. They'll build it in BrightAuthor, set up BrightSign Network if you need that. Hand over the keys. It can all be behind the scenes, so your customer doesn't need to know that you're using Red Dot. But for all of you who don't want to spend all the time and energy to get to know the ins and outs of BrightAuthor, because it can be very, very tricky, Daryl's team does a great job. They're very inexpensive, and it's a great way for you to just get a project done correctly and hand it over to your customer, and they'll be very happy. That being said, go onto our website. If you really should, all of you that are selling BrightSign should go onto our website and really get view some of these training tutorials that we've done, and really get at least a basic understanding of how to use BrightAuthor and BrightSign Network. They're great resources. The training modules are great, and we're updating them as we speak. So I would highly recommend that all of you get on to brightsign.biz and go to the training tab and really start diving into learning how to use the product, because that is the biggest hiccup for any dealer selling BrightSign, is not knowing how to set something up. And whether you want to use it or not, if it's a not, go to Daryl at Red Dot. We'll get you his contact information, and he can do it for you. And he does a very good job of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, I want to go ahead and thank Eric and Chris for taking the time today to join us to host a presentation with us, and I want to thank everyone still on the call for sticking with us. We went over by a little bit, so we had really good content. We had really good engagement. So thanks everyone for the great questions. And if anyone has any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can forward any questions on to Eric and to Chris. And Chris, I'm looking forward to having you in the market so we can beat you up a little bit.
Absolutely. Looking forward to as well. I'll stop by.
All right, great.
Take care.
Thanks everyone for coming with us. We're going to go ahead and end the webinar now.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks again for having us.